Well, you may experience the problem then of having too much democracy, like the United States of America. But I'd like to, he's the only one who laughs at that. But I want to ask you that same question.
Or in California.
That same question about repressive states, because in the State Department in the US, we're dealing with this idea that we want a kind of radical freedom agenda where everybody has complete openness and transparency. We talk to the Chinese all the time about allowing openness. Syria is a counterexample to Egypt. What do you do about that?
Well, and I think this is where the marketplace comes into play very significantly. In the context of Syria, for example, the State Department within the past year sponsored a delegation of telecommunications executives, led by a young man named Jared Cohen, who's now working, for Google, who I know is co-sponsoring this event today. And it was a very blunt discussion with the Syrian government, which is, if you want this kind of investment that we from the private sector can bring to a country like Syria, that you have to play by a certain set of rules, transparency, openness, accountability, and so forth. If you're willing to play in that way, then their opportunities will exist. If you choose not to play in that way, there won't. Now, China is a hybrid where it's trying to have its cake.
But that argument doesn't work with China.
And eat it too, but not every country is China that has the economic leverage in the marketplace to be able to draw the companies there and perhaps to some extent dictate the terms, but not exclusively dictate the terms. But there's going to be genuine competition going forward. These revolutions have evolved. Mubarak tried to turn off the internet and was not successful. By the time he hit the switch, the horse had literally left the barn. Syria, within the last week, has not only beyond the media restrictions, just tried to shut down the internet. It's unclear to me that they will be successful. China tries a different model, which is try to make the words Jasmine Revolution disappear, from the internet. But clearly, what the United States is promoting is, the access to information that will empower people, which will in turn, over time, make governments more responsible and more accountable.
So let me put you on the spot for a second when it comes to the United States and information. You were famously outspoken about the treatment of Bradley Manning, PFC Bradley Manning, who allegedly, because he's not stood trial yet, leaked confidential information from the State Department, from the Department of Defense, from the National Security Agency. There are those who look at him as the Daniel Ellsberg of the Iraq era, and that he has, like his patron, an agenda of radical freedom of information. Where do you stand on that?
Where to start? First of all, we're talking about, and I think this is crucial to the difference between a whistleblower like Daniel Ellsberg, who gave a report to the New York Times that dealt with a specific subject for which he had specific knowledge, with the intent of trying to stop a war that he thought was damaging to the United States. Whether or not you condone whistleblowing, that is something that we understand. The last time I was in New York, I was sitting on a panel like this, and the woman to my right said, well, Bradley Manning was trying for industrial scale whistleblowing, which I think is a contradiction of terms. But what the marriage of information and technology did in the context of WikiLeaks was to see the release of documents that touch on literally every relationship that the United States has with every country in the world. And there has been some impact, some significance, some not so much, in every country in the world. That has done damage to the United States. There's a difference between transparency, and I would argue, and in your business, that the government, it's very hard for the government to actually keep a secret. But to have that volume of information, much of it classified, and the classification is less about the information itself, more about the sources of that information. And the tragic irony, you know, in the world of Julian Assange, where he says there should be no secrets. Well, if there are no secrets, Google has no secret algorithm, it has no competitive advantage, or Coca-Cola has no you know, secret formula, so it's no different than any other soft drink. Every successful entity has, you know, proprietary information and requires secrets. But the real test is whether you have a sufficient level of debate and transparency and accountability, and I think we do have that in this country, absent you know, the release of this information. But the tragic irony for what Julian Assange did do is that he was trying to empower activists like Amr around the world. Well, our diplomats around the world talk to these activists all the time to get a sense of what's happening in the country and have that inform United States foreign policy. But in many of these repressive countries, some of whom might have hacked into an unclassified network and now have the full database of these documents, the net effect of WikiLeaks is actually to put these activists at greater risk. And in fact, we know, you know, some of them have been detained, intimidated, jailed in the aftermath of WikiLeaks. That's the danger. So while transparency is vitally important, if done wrong, it actually then undercuts the kind of accountability and responsible government we're trying to promote.
So let's tee up that point about transparency. And we tend to think of transparency as a kind of undifferentiated good. You know, if it's open, that's good. If it's not, that's bad. If a cynic is looking at Arab Spring and Egypt in particular, you'd say, well, let's see, they all went out to the square, they got a lot of television coverage, they communicated with each other. Mubarak went to his resort and now is in prison, but the military is still in charge, the same military that operated and terrorized people under Mubarak. The institutions haven't changed, the businesses haven't changed. Is this just a kind of false front of freedom, and the younger Egyptians are indulged, and now it's back to business as usual?
No, actually, what I'm really proud of, that every activist in Egypt knows what you're saying. We know that it's not just about Mubarak being resigned. It's a lot bigger than that. The revolution hasn't ended, and that's what we say all the time. We still have a long road. It can take a couple of years. There was never a revolution that reached its goals by like a couple of months in the course of history. Like the French Revolution took like 10 years. We had a revolution in 1919. It took like 2 years. So we had a long road ahead of us. But at the same time, we want to work. We want to start rebuilding our country again after all the destruction that Mubarak regime did for 30 years. But we are aware that we have a long journey to have a civilian country, to have a country that respects human rights, to have a country that will put everyone who made anything wrong in prison. And that's a long journey, because we had a lot of people that need to be in prison. Actually, we need to build new prisons for those who's not there yet. So we know that it's still a long road. And that's when we were using the same tools, like social media tools, to tell each other. Because now, after Mubarak was so controlling the media, now the military is doing the same thing. They are trying to control the media again. They are trying to like have guidelines you can't cross. So social media is still on track. People are not afraid. We did the hard part, so everything else is going to be a lot much easier than what we done before. We had people with snipers on rooftops shooting us in the square, and that was crazy. We had the scariest week ever anybody can live. Not a single police officer in the streets in the country, not single one. All the thugs were in the streets with knives and guns and weapons, attacking every home in the country. And that was, we will never see a scarier day than that. It was like a dystopia, as dystopia really means. Mm-hmm. So everyone went to the streets, even in Danit Tahrir or under their homes, protecting their homes. Everyone was a police cop. Mm-hmm. Everyone in the country. So, and we think till now that was all planned by a regime to just make us go home. So I think, if we pass that, we can pass anything.
Mm-hmm. So, and I agree, and there's always some debate about, as PJ mentioned, was this the Twitter revolution? It wasn't Twitter that stood up to the police and the military. It was brave young men and women, Egyptians, who were doing that, not a tool. But at the same time, there are other forces you were talking about at work in Egypt. If you take the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, they don't have a Facebook page. They don't have a Twitter account. Yet you could argue their power is increasing in a kind of post-revolutionary Egypt, and they're doing it the old-fashioned way, through word of mouth, through persuasion. How do you address that?
Actually, Muslim Brotherhoods, Muslims Brotherhood had a Twitter account and Facebook page and everything, but they don't depend on it as we do, as liberals in general do. Muslims Brotherhood, some guys of them had the most visited page on Facebook for news. It's called Trust News. Those are guys from Muslims Brotherhood. And on the other hand, now, if we're speaking now, Muslims Brotherhood are way more concerned with the people, with the voting power. And they are playing politics the old-fashioned way. And they are smart with that. But lots of liberals now are starting to do the same thing. Of course, they have a long experience and an advantage because they made it before us. But lots of new parties are forming, are founded by liberals, and they understood the lesson. Maybe you can gather 1 million people from the internet and put them in the square. But you can't do that when it comes to elections. When it comes to elections, as I said, 80% of the people don't have a Facebook account, don't have a Twitter account. They don't care. So what you have to do is really go to the streets. The good thing about the revolution was it's so easy now to gather 1 million people from the internet. Mm-hmm. So easy. Mm-hmm. Even if I want to pave my streets, I can make a Facebook page, let's all pave my street. So everyone will gather. It's not that hard anymore. And that's the very good thing about it. Because any other regime that will come, it will have what we call tahrirophobia. So he will be so afraid to make anyone angry, because it will be so easy to make him look like a regime that lost its credibility with the people. Mm. So even if the Muslims Brotherhood took power, or any other Islamist or liberal or any other kind of regime, he will try to please everyone for the next couple of years. And I think till they have back a big army of police officers and brutality and plant the fears inside of us. Till that happens again, and I don't think it will, but nobody's gonna get anyone angry. Mm-hmm.